Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game from this year's FIDE World Team Championship. It's a game between Hans, Moke, Niemann and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. It's a wonderful attacking game, but it will be hard at times to even imagine who is the actual attacker, as you'll see what I mean by this. So Hans has the white pieces, and this is round 2. In round 1, Hans drew his game against Radoslav Wojtaszek, and Mamedyarov won his game against Nodirbek Yakubov of Uzbekistan. Like I said, this is their second game. And Hans opens with pawn to e4. We're gonna have some 10 moves of theory, not too much, as sometimes we have even 20 moves of known theory. So e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. Hans goes for the Ruy Lopez. And if you are wondering why Hans is playing board 1 for the United States, as the United States has quite a lot of very, very strong grandmasters, none of them are playing. That's why Hans is playing board 1, even though he is almost 2700 rated. And Mamedyarov, of course, is the top rated player from Azerbaijan, so that's why he's playing board 1. Bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez, a6, Morphy's defense, bishop to a4, and knight to f6. We have castles, and now knight captures on e4. So this is all very standard stuff. We've seen this many times. d4, b5 attacking the bishop, bishop to b3, and now pawn to d5. We have d captures on e5 and bishop to e6. Defending the d5 pawn, knight b to d2, and now knight to c5. Attacking the bishop on b3, and here there are some over 1400 games where c3 was played, but Hans plays queen to e2. And okay, it's not a new move, it has been played like a dozen times, but only in lower level tournaments and games. When I say lower level, I mean like the highest rated player that played queen to e2 was some 2400, maybe 2450, and for these gentlemen that's lower rated. All of the games where queen to e2 was played were continued with bishop to e7. Interestingly, bishop to e7 is the strongest move recommended by the engine, but Mamedyarov plays pawn to g6, and it is now as of move 10 that we have a completely new game. So Hans definitely took Mamedyarov by surprise here. We have c3 now, and bishop to g7. Not interested in capturing on that. The bishop on b3. If you capture and knight captures, the knight will have access to c5 indefinitely, as you are probably developing your bishop to g7. Once this knight lands on c5, it's never going away. So instead, after c3, bishop to g7, now comes knight to d4, attacks the knight on c6, so Mamedyarov trades, but not on d4, he goes for the pawn on e5, and Hans is saying you should grab this pawn. And okay, Mamedyarov does, knight captures on e5, pawn to f4, knight e to d3 now. An excellent square for the knight, and pawn to f5. So this is all well within Hans's preparation, I believe. Now attacking the bishop here, and you have two choices here. Either you play g captures on f5, of course the bishop cannot move, the bishop is pinned, the king is on e8, or you go knight captures on c1. Those are your only two options, and they are quite similar. So Hans played knight captures on c1, rook a captures on c1, and now g captures on f5. We have knight captures on f5, and now bishop to f6. You could also consider maybe castling here. Mamedyarov decides to go bishop to f6, and now comes bishop to c2. Also very interesting is knight to d4. This is really asking black a lot of very unpleasant questions. For one being, do you capture on d4? But once you do this, once you give up the dark square bishop, look at this, c captures on d4, and now where is the knight going? If you don't want to allow something like queen to e5, that will put immense pressure. You will have to go captures, and then knight gets the c5 square. For example, queen to d6, knight will land on c5, and you are never getting rid of this knight. This is black can just resign here. So this is what could happen. However, after knight to d4, you don't have to capture. You could also just play something like bishop to g7, then white continues bishop c2, and the game just continues. So after bishop to f6, bishop to c2 was played by Hans. Now we have knight to d7. This is very nice, as it prepares queen e7, queen to c5. You know that the knight will not remain on f5. And here, knight to d4 by Hans. Here, the absolute top move recommended by the engine is king to h1. and the king would be very nicely placed on h1. But okay, knight to d4 by Hans, queen to e7, and now rook c to e1, putting both queen and the rook on the e-file, which is very nice. As you can see, but now Mamedyarov can just trade down and go into an equal game. Bishop captures on d4, c captures, and just queenside castles. And now you might think, but yes, but now Hans will get this c5 square for his knight. Interestingly, it's not all that potent now. So here, knight to b3, queen to d6, and now not knight to c5, first pawn to a4. Hans knows that Mamedyarov will now use the g file to attack his king, so he wants to make his attack on the queen side happen just a little bit sooner, so he gives up a pawn temporarily for that. B captures on a4, knight to a5 now, and now, interestingly, knight doesn't even come to c5, knight to a5, and now queen to b6, putting pressure on the knight. Queen to d2, defending, and now rook d to g8, preparing now to attack the white king. Bishop captures on a4, and now a beautiful move by Mamedyarov, pretty much the only one that doesn't give Hans the upper hand, and that is rook to g4. With tempo, not only are you preparing to double up on the g file, but you are also threatening to pick up the d4 pawn. So here, knight to c6, this is how Hans defends it. The knight now defends the d4 pawn. Knight to b8, trying to eliminate this knight as it's a very strong piece. h3, attacking the rook, and here Shakhriyar just says, I'm not interested in anything you're doing here on the king side. You can have that rook. I'm just going to play knight captures on c6. And here Mamedyarov gives up the exchange for the d4 pawn and for some very interesting counterplay. So h captures on g4, knight captures on d4, now threatening some very nasty discoveries if the knight ever moves. Queen to e3, and now rook to g8, getting the other rook into the game as well. Bishop to d1, defending the g4 pawn, but it doesn't really matter. Bishop captures on g4, rook to f2, the rook will also be needed guarding the g2 pawn, plus you want to have something extra in between that black queen on b6 and king on g1. So bishop captures on d1, rook captures, and now for the second time in the game, rook to g4, the absolute strongest for Mamedyarov. Seems like you're just defending your knight here, but the real thing is that you are leaving Hans without a move, really. Let's say you try something like rook f to d2, just knight to f3 with check. Look at this. How do you stop this? Now, if you capture the knight, you just lose the queen, and if you play king to f2 to guard the queen, then you give up the rook here. And now, okay, you can trade, but even if queen captures on b6, there's the in-between knight to e4 check, and you just lose everything. King moves, and now c captures on b6, you're just up a full knight. So instead, after rook to g4, rook to d3 was played. Now you are no longer allowing such things. And here comes rook to e4, attacking Hans's queen. And queen to g5 is the way to go, but Hans plays queen to h3 with check, and now it will be a bit difficult to defend this position with white. King to b7, we have rook to e3. With queen to d7, Hans is still in the game, but he plays rook to e3. He wants to trade off the rooks, and now there is only one move that wins the game for Shakhriyar. So feel free to pause the video and try to find this incredible idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this idea, as it's not the first thing that comes to mind. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to f5. Now, with this pawn move played, you are ensuring that if rook ever captures on e4, you are playing f captures on e4, and you will have two connected pass pawns. The problem is, if you play something like a5, let's say, you could also play this. This is even the second top move recommended by the engine. Now, white will happily capture on e4. You will have to capture with the d pawn, and now, okay, white will unpin, so now the rook can move, and after f5, yes, you are getting some pawn action here. But queen to e3, queen to c5, you're going to play rook to d2, you're going to go after the knight, And after some like queen c1 check, king h2 and c5, you will play queen to h6, and now you will win the h7 pawn with check, and you are still very much in the game. So that's one way to do it. However, after f5, it's just not clear how to play this. One thing you might consider is just capturing that pawn on h7, but if you do this now, there are, well, the rook on e3 is hanging, so there's that. So instead, after this f5 move, we have king to h1, first unpinning from this diagonal, finally, and now knight to b5. This is a beautiful move by Mamedyarov, as it prepares knight to d6, which will be crucial later on in the defense of the c8 square, as you'll see. Plus, it opens up the queen's diagonal, so the rooks are now attacked. You are threatening to just pick up the rook here. Rook captures on e4. You could also play rook f to e2, but it's not much better. Rook captures on e4. F captures, now rook to f8, threatening queen to c8 check, but now knight to d6, stopping that queen to c8 check idea. Queen captures on h7, and now queen captures on b2. So similar like in the game Magnus played that we've shown in the previous round. Mamedyarov is down the exchange, but he's up 3 pawns, which is not as great as in that game, but I mean, it's a lot. So queen to g8, trying to get that rook to g8 check in to win the black queen, and now queen a1 check. King to h2, queen to e5 check, and queen to g3, offering a queen trade, which Mamedyarov declines. If you don't want to play this, you could also play king to g1, but then some like queen to d4 check, king h2 and e3, and this pawn is very close to promotion. Even if you give one check, doesn't really matter. The knight here does an excellent job of preventing the white queen from delivering checks, and you will just advance your pawn to victory. So instead, after queen e5, queen to g3, he blocks check, but now Mamedyarov says we are not trading queens just yet. Queen h5 check, king to g1, queen to d1 check, king h2, and now queen to h5 check. Seems like he's trying to get a repetition, but not really. King to g1, and now d4. He's just trolling Hans, as it would seem. Rook to f1, and now queen to c5, threatening some nasty discoveries here. Rook to b1 check, king to a7, and now queen to f2, stopping d3 because just queen captures on c5. So knight to b5, closing off the b file and adding a defender to the d4 pawn. Rook to a1, and now we have knight to c3. g4, there is nothing left for Hans in this game other than to try and push that g pawn to victory. e3 attacks the queen, queen to f6, and now you have to, again, be very careful. You don't want to mess up and blunder the a6 pawn. So queen c4, Shach defends this, and now queen to e5. We have pawn to e2, and now pawn to g5. We have d3, queen to e3 with check, king to b7, and now queen to f3 with check, knight to e4 blocking, and rook to b1 with check, king to c6, and now queen to f8. And there are many ways to win this. Of course, the position is completely winning for black, but Mamedyarov chooses the simplest one, and that, of course, is queen to c5 with check. He forces a queen trade, and it was in this position on move 57 that Hans Niemann resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. I forgot to mention in the previous video, I think the game between Magnus and Duda ended in 64 moves, and there is nothing I like more than for a chess game to end in 64 moves. That's always very nice. Okay, there are some things I like more, but I really enjoy that. So yeah, queen c5, Hans resigns, and a very nice win for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. Taking down the first board for the United States and gaining a very, very important point. So now you resign because after the queen trade, which is, a must, captures, rook to c1 check can be played, but after king d4, there's no stopping the pawns. If king rook e1, just d2, and if captures d1 queening, there is no way to play this. It's completely winning for Mamedyarov. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. First game that we are showing from the FIDE World Team Championship 2022. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any of your own favorites, do use hashtag suggestion in the comments. I will look over it and try to show some interesting games from this tournament. So yeah, once again, hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Francis Air, Carmen Polifronio, Sinister Paul, and Ravishing Reptiles YouTube B4, and AI Mind for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this wonderful event and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.